Good morning, everyone. This is a quick video here. I'm talking about gentrification. Gentrification, do you see the definition? It's the process of reworking and improving a district or a house so that it conforms to middle class values. The New York Housing Authority, which also goes by the name of NYCHA, is doing complete installations of new boilers, and it's been said to be gentrification. It is gentrification, but not the gentrification of people to come and take care of a neighborhood. Excuse me, because I have a cold and I might sniffle a little. But this is just going to be a quick one about gentrification. This gentrification is taking place because the repairs of these boilers in the complexes all over New York City is because most of these boilers have been installed since the 1950s, which is when public housing was started in the United States. The public housing was started to accommodate the returning World War II veterans and Korean War veterans. It was to accommodate the young men who had taken part in World War II to defeat Hitler, who had vowed to conquer the world. Most of these young men had quit school, had left school in high school, and they, thought they were going to war. They they had families and whatever. So they were, they made the babies and they came home. So public housing was made to accommodate the baby boomers. The baby boomers. The GED, which is the General Equivalency Diploma, was developed also to give these young men who had left school or who had been drafted and had not finished their education a chance to finish their education and to become educated. And the thing about public housing, over the years, what public housing did was it allowed low-income families who had children, because at that time, we're talking about the 50s, 60s, people had lots of children. They had a lot of children. I have two aunts had 9 kids. I have one aunt had 15. I had one aunt that had 22. But anyway, the low-income housing, it was low-income housing, and it was to accommodate the people who had lots of children, and it was to give them the low-income rent so they could save their money and become homeowners. But over the years, public housing has become a permanent lifestyle. Public housing was never meant to be permanent housing. It was supposed to be a stepping stone for low-income families to get back on their feet and to be able to buy a house, to have home ownership. So now, after 50 some years, some boilers have not been replaced. They've been repaired until they can't be repaired anymore. And the ones that have been repaired with the broken, rusted, older parts. WPIX 11, Channel 11, New York, has the story. And if you go to their archives, you'll be able to see this investigation they did on New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. So when you talk about gentrification, yes, it is gentrification. It is going to bring the heating systems in all of the NYCHA buildings, where in the winter people will have heat. Also, they are going to repair broken, dilapidated walls. They're going to take care of the rodent problem. And the lady, I don't remember her name, but she spent weekends in public housing apartments, and she said it is past a disaster. It is a humanitarian need to have these things done. So it is gentrification. There will be no more $200 or $200 rents. There won't be any more $200 rents. The rents will go up because in order to repair and maintain repairs, the landlords must have the money. See, this is why not only New York City how public housing has deteriorated, public housing all over the United States has deteriorated. In New Jersey, public housing as high rises has been torn down in the town I live in Paterson, New Jersey. There's only one set of high rises left, and it's not public housing, it's private housing. But all high rise public housing in Paterson, New Jersey has been torn down and replaced with row houses. And the all tenants in these housing complexes are paying for their own heating costs. They pay, like in New York, you pay the Con Edison. These people, they pay their rent and they pay the PSE&G for their electricity. So public housing, as is known, is not going to be the same. Rents are going to be raised, and and the rent is going to go up. So that is the gentrification. It is not the gentrification that people are going to come back and take it over. I don't see anybody coming back into moving into 16-story high rises. No, I don't see it, but I do see the rents going up, and that is gentrification. But in order to maintain these issues, these things they have to be done. So that's the point. It is gentrification, but it's not the gentrification that some may want you to believe. In order to beautify, and to not even beautify, but to make these buildings livable, the rent has to go up. You know, the welfare, which is, I'm not knocking people on welfare, but if you get one set amount, you can't, landlords can't rent. And this is why most people have denied welfare people, people on welfare apartments, especially in private housing, because taxes go up, electric bills go up, everything goes up. So it's hard for people to, it's hard for people to maintain their properties. So yes, gentrification is coming to public housing. NYCHA is repairing boilers, and they will repair those decrepit conditions and take care of the rodent problem and the garbage not being disposed of properly. And with that, yes, the rent is going to go up. And that's the gentrification of public housing. Yes, it will be the gentrification of public housing. There will be no more $200 rents, and it's inevitable. It's inevitable. People want quality places to stay, which I don't blame anybody. They want good places to stay, but they don't. If the housing authority doesn't get substantial rent to help maintain it, This is what you have. You have the situation that NYCHA has been forced into now. They have been forced to give people heat because the boilers are just gone. A lot of those boilers have been in place since the 1950s. We're talking like almost 70 years. And they've been patched and patched and patched until most of them, some of them, the boilers that were installed aren't even made. They've taken the boilers that they've had no choice but to replace, taken the old parts that they considered usable to patch up older buildings. But there's no more patchwork available. NYCHA will be going up on their rents. And this is all across the United States. Public housing in New Jersey, the tenants are required to pay their heating costs, their lighting costs to ease up. And still, and there's public housing, but it's like in row houses. You know, it's no more high rise except for the one high rise that's left, which is private housing. So there's nothing the housing authority can do for it. But they're replacing them with townhouses. Very selective who they put in. They have apartments available for the disabled. And, you know, some people say that it's very disturbing to them. What are the people on welfare going to do? A lot of those people, I hate to say it, are people who can get up, who can get jobs, and who should be working. They should get up. Public housing was never meant to be a permanent situation. It was meant to be a stepping stone for those individuals with large families to get a job, save money, and to go into home ownership. But like I said, over the years, it's become a thing to do, a definite thing to do. So people are feeling sorry. They're saying they're gentrified, that New York Housing Authority is gentrifying public housing, which they are, but it's not gentrifying to the point that they want to move people out, and move a certain people back into it. What it is, they're going to have to raise the rent if they are to improve the living conditions that these people are living. I've seen some of it, and it's horrible with the walls. And I've never lived in public housing myself. I've always lived in private housing. I've always lived in my family's own house, and I have lived in an apartment complex, but it was not public. It was private. It was a private housing complex. I've always lived in private housing, never. But I know people who live in public housing, you know, so I know the conditions and the nastiness in the elevators, so all of that. But like I said, to maintain these buildings properly and to give the people who stay there a nice, decent place to live, it's going to take raising of the rents. It's going to take weeding out the problems. So what they did here in Patterson was they went through, they looked and saw anybody who had a police record for selling drugs. Those families were evicted. They were evicted. They were not given places to stay. They then went and saw the people who paid their rent late. This was after all the buildings were imploded and they put the new buildings in. Whoever paid their rent, who had a history of not paying their rent on time, and who went to tenants court, they were not offered apartments back in. And people who worked were given the first choice of apartments. People who were sick and honestly disabled were giving choices of the apartment. So the sitting on your behind and doing nothing days are over for public housing. The dealing the drugs are over for public housing because in order to maintain the buildings, like I said, the way they should be done, they have got to do these things because it's shining a bad light on them and they must be able to do the things they do need to do to keep it going. So with that being said, um, if anybody's watching, look and tell me how you would like to. What's your take on all of this? I mean, God blesses those who work. Work is hard. Work is hard. But I came from a family that worked. You know, I was not allowed. Yes. Oh, good morning, Max Bird. Yes. I grew up. My dad was, he was terrible. After I had my son, I stayed home with him because my son had a bad heart. He had open heart surgery, so I was just laying there. My mom was dead. So once my son went into daycare, he didn't have no problems with his heart no more. My dad came in my room every day, and what he said to me was, "When are you going to get up and get a job? I didn't raise you on welfare. I went to work every day. I took care of you." He aggravated me so bad. It was before right before Labor Day. And Labor Day 1985, I will never forget it. I told my girlfriend, getting up, I'm going to get a job. I went out that day. The day after Labor Day 1985, I got a job. I started working, and I worked until I retired for over 30 years. It's a mindset. Like I said, if you go and look at the history of public housing was started for World War II veterans, for war veterans who, especially the World War II veterans who came out of came out of World War II because a lot of them left school. A lot of the young men that went to that war were young men who hadn't finished school. They needed these men to defeat Hitler because Hitler's plan was to yes, the GED, which is called the General Education Diploma, was started for the young men who had interrupted their high school education to help fight Hitler in World War II and the Korean War. So the veterans, they did it. Then over the years, it became where they decided to give they started to give young families that had a lot of children a chance to get, to save their money, to get into public housing, save their money, and become and save their money so they could go into home ownership. And the reason why I know this is because I have family members who did it, who lived in public housing, saved their money, and got it. And I come from a family that have a lot of kids. My mother didn't have a lot, and my grandmother didn't, but her sisters, they had lots of kids. When I tell you they had lots of kids, they had nine. Two of them had nine. One of them had 15. One had 22. So, and they came from sharecropping down south. So they took advantage of it, and they went to home ownership. They went to business ownership. Some of them got the GED. And people don't understand the GED. Now it's kids don't want to go to school. I'll go get my GED. That's not what the GED was for. It was started for returning veterans who fought in a war. So I'm not going to talk too long about it. I'm not going to talk too long because I have a very bad cold, but anybody who hears this who wants to, debate me on it, it's okay because it is, this is what it's all about. And it is gentrification, but if they repair the buildings, then the area surrounding it, like with the garbage hanging out, it will become better. So it is gentrification because I looked it up because I saw a video where it said gentrification had come. And I was thinking gentrification was where people take over so they can move in. But this is not the gentrification. And by the meaning, it's gentrification of redoing an area to make it livable, so people will want to live in that area. So I, I don't know. A lot of people may feel like, who the hell does she think she is? Because, like I said, I never lived in public housing. I've always lived in a private home. And the high rise that I did live in, thank you, Max. The housing that I did live in, the high rise that I did live in, and the one that I do, which is not a high rise, but the complex I live in now, has always been public. It has always been private. I've never lived in nothing public because my mother, even down south, my mother lived in a house. So when she came north, living in apartments, she lived in apartments for a while, but her and my dad worked and they owned a house for over, oh my God. I left my father's house when I was, oh my God, I had my son, I was like 48 when I left my dad's house, my own dad's house. So, yeah, you know, so public housing, I had friends who lived in it, and I tell you, I used to like to go because a lot of nonsense went on in public housing back then and always. So, yeah. But, yeah, Max, people are going to, you don't think they should because you seem to know. But a lot of people will dispute it and not like it because it's me saying these things. You know how that is, but I've learned to ignore a lot of stuff. But anybody who doesn't believe me could look it up. And I'll say it again. Public housing was not meant to be a lifestyle. It was meant to be a stepping stone to home ownership, but over the years, it got crossed up, just like the history behind welfare. Welfare was started because of the Depression to bring the country out of the Great Depression of the 1920s. It was started to give people a chance to get back on their feet, just like Social Security. Social Security was started by Franklin Roosevelt to ensure that when a person got older, that they would have an income. Because during the Depression, there were lots of old people who had no wasn't. Yes, it wasn't, that's the word I want, generational lifestyle. You have generations of people who lived in it. And Social Security, and that's what welfare was about, to give you a chance to get a job. All of these social programs were started by Roosevelt to bring America out of the Depression, you know, and it just went from a good thing to a bad thing, you know. It was not meant because there are people who raise their children on welfare. And when my son was sick, that was something else my dad said. I never raised you on welfare. You know, he was that type, get out and work. I come from a working family. Women work, ladies, men work, everybody works. Everybody works, and, you know, I was taught that nobody owes me nothing. And welfare is not a lifestyle anyway. At one time, it was $279 a month for an adult and a child to live off for a month. I mean, you know, that's not my style. That's not me. I worked at my job till it closed because there's no more. So, like I said, people can believe what they want. Look up anybody who sees this and disagrees. Look it up. Do the research on it. Do the research on how welfare started. Do the research on how the GED got started and who it was started for. It wasn't started for people to tell your kids, oh, don't go to school. And I hear people saying that higher education, college is a trap. No. I graduated the high school I went to. When I applied for a job, I was known. It was known. My sister graduated from Eastside High School, the the high school that you see in the movie Lean on Me. That is a real school in Paterson, New Jersey. At one time, it was number one in the country. But like everything else, it had gone. She graduated. And yes, Joe Clark was the principal. But she graduated way before Joe Clark, which it was number one in the country. If you went to that school, you could go to any college in the United States. It was doctors, lawyers, and lawyers' children that went there. My dad was just my dad just worked on the garbage truck. My dad went to third grade. My mom went to fifth grade. They weren't educated people, but they knew the value of education for their children, and it was a way out of poverty. So if you go to school, by going to high school, I have never, ever worked a minimum wage job. When I got my first job at 16, the minimum wage was $1.90. I got $2.50 an hour because the gentleman who interviewed me, he had went to the same school that I went to. So education is important. It gives you, it gives you value. It gives you value, you know, there. Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. They don't realize the value of education. Um, have you ever heard of Max Bird? Have you ever heard of Hinchcliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey? It has been designated a national landmark because it was where the old Negro Leagues, where they came to play, the old Negro League baseball players came to play before Jackie Robinson. And I'm not sure, but I think Jackie Robinson had played there also. So it's the home of Larry Doby. It's the home of Johnny Briggs, who was the first black player to play in the American League, American Baseball League. So black people have played an important part in the history of New Jersey and in this country. But the people who came up from the South, they instilled education in their children because a lot of them were sharecroppers. A lot of them couldn't go to school. Right. So, a lot of black people couldn't go to school and couldn't go to school down south, so they encouraged their children to get the education. And then the elder people who grew up also encouraged us to go to school. They, my grandmother actually helped a lawyer, the pastor's church, a pastor who had children, and my grandmother and the ladies from the church actually cut dinners and, encouraged the kids to go to school. So, yes, there's a lot to be told. I'm going to make this one short, like I said, because excuse me, I have the flu or have something. I'm not feeling good, but I just felt I had to say that. Yes, gentrification has come to public housing tonight, to New York City Housing Authority. And it more than likely it's going to change. It's going to change the area for the better. It's going to make there are no more $200 rents. Welfare in the state of New Jersey has changed drastically. They had such a program as temporary rental assistance. You could live 5 years in someone's house and not pay a rent. The state would pay you for it. But if you came up, say, $100 short with your rent, and you went to social services and asked could they help you with your rent until you got back to work or whatever, they would tell you no, you had to be on welfare. So it's a catch-22. So this is what we need to tell our young people: get up, get educated, get out the system, because the system is not geared to help us. It's geared to keep us down. It's geared to keep conditions the way they are in public housing now. So with that, I'm going to end. Everybody have a good day. I am not feeling well with this cold. So have a good day, Max.